Alright, last section of this chapter. It has been a doozy, but hopefully it's been good for you. The last section here, section 6, is going to look at the different types of immunity and how we can experience those. So, natural immunity can be divided up into, immunity in general can be divided into natural immunity or artificial immunity. Alright, natural immunity is going to be natural. Alright, so any immunity that is acquired through normal biological experiences of an individual. So, when I go out into the yard and rake leaves or pull weeds during the summertime and I accidentally hit one of the thorns on a bush in our front yard, right? And I get a very small puncture wound and I get dirt put in there underneath the skin, and there's germs in that dirt. All right, I am actually being inoculated and my immune system is being primed every time I cut myself and I have dirt that gets in there. All right, so that's natural. Unlike getting a tetanus shot would be artificial immunity, but getting a tetanus shot for the tetanus toxin actually provides similar immunity than if I were to get a very small amount of that organism under my skin because of that thorn prick. So if you have a lot of natural events, that can actually, in some cases, be very similar to that artificial immunity, although it's always good to have the proper vaccinations. So, artificial then is through medical procedures. So active immunity is also a way to describe your immune process. All right, active is where your own immune system is going to do the work. So, occurs when an individual receives an immune stimulus. That can be just getting sick normally or getting a vaccine, but that stimulus activates the B and the T cells to produce the memory cells and the activated components. All right, it also creates memory. All right, much better memory. And so then if you get re-exposed, you're going to be protected. Active immunity, however, does take several days to develop, but it can also last for a long period of time. And this can be active immunity can be natural or artificial. Again, a natural process, thorn prick, or artificial being a vaccine. Regardless of how that antigen is entering your body, you're still expecting your own immune system to do the work. With passive immunity, so again, you have active and passive. Passive, what does that mean? Not a whole lot, right? Not doing a whole lot. So passive immunity occurs when an individual receives antibodies from another animal or person. And that really is the only way that you would get passive immunity is through immunoglobulins or antibody transfer. Now, because this is a protein that your body did not produce, it does actually have a short half-life because that protein will become degraded. That protein, that antibody, is not like an enzyme that gets recycled. Once that antibody is used, it's going to be cleared out in that immune reaction. And so you're only protected for a short period of time. The passive immunity, it lacks memory because your immune system didn't do anything to create those antibodies. And so because you lack the immunity, you lack the ability to be protected against the disease again because your body isn't making those antibodies. However, it's going to be immediate. So if you run into some trouble and you get pumped full of a specific antibody, all right, that immune onset is going to be immediate. As soon as those antibodies start circulating through your blood, they're going to be ready to work. All right, similar to the number 2 point there, it's short term, and this can also be natural or artificial. in origin, which we'll see right here with table 13.2. So this figure combines both the natural and passive, as well as the the natural or artificial, or active or passive. So in the upper left corner here, this person is sick. Alright, she has a bunch of Kleenex on here, so she has the flu or she has a cold. And this is natural. She was exposed somehow, probably someone sneezing on her or sneezing on or wiping snot. Sounds kind of gross, but it's true. Wiping snot on a doorknob or something, and she touches the doorknob and then touches her nose, the inside of her nose or her eye, and that virus gets inside of her. Alright, so that's a natural process. And then her immune system, as she's going through this period of being miserable because of the cold, her immune system is actually waging war against that virus, and then she'll be protected against that next viral infection of the same origin. Unfortunately, there are over 100 different viruses that will cause the common cold. So while you may be protected against one virus, you could actually still get a cold a couple of months down the road because you've been exposed to a different virus. Alright, on the top right, you have natural passive immunity. And so this example is a mom breastfeeding. And one type of antibody, IgA, is actually secreted into breast milk. And so when a mom gives an infant breast milk, that infant is pulling in IgA, natural antibodies that the mom's body has made. And it's actually a really good thing because then those antibodies go into the infant's digestive tract and just hang out there. And that's very protective for that infant. Alright, but natural, yes. Passive, yes, because that infant's immune system isn't doing anything. It's the mom's immune system that is doing anything. And why is this a good thing? Because that infant's immune system needs time to mature. And it generally takes, 2 to 3 months before that infant's immune system is really good at making antibodies. Yes, they get vaccinated when they are born. They get vaccinated when they're a month old. All right, that's really trying to establish maturity, establish growth in their immune system. But until they can really do things on their own, it's better to get a little bit of extra help. And with breastfeeding, that IgA is always going to be present in breast milk. And so if that mom and that infant are able to breastfeed for 6 months, that's fantastic. Usually it's about 6 months where that infant's immune system is really, finally getting a hold of things and knowing how to function. But even if the mom's only able to breastfeed for a month, it's still providing protective antibodies to that infant. Alright, then on the bottom left, you have artificial active immunity. Alright, artificial, that kid is getting a vaccine. And so it is artificially induced. That antigen in whatever vaccine it is being artificially introduced into that boy. But then that boy's immune system is going to be active and actually establish the memory T cells, the cytotoxic T cells, the helper T cells that are going to specifically respond against that pathogen if that child runs into it again, or producing B cells and plasma cells to produce antibodies and memory B cells. That'll be there ready to go when the child sees that antigen for real. Alright, and then artificial passive immunity. Alright, this person is probably undergoing chemotherapy, and that person is very sick. That person may have had her immune system wiped out because of the cancer treatment. And if that's the case, you have to be very careful because that person's going to run into organisms all the time, no matter how careful you are. But to help provide protection while that person's immune system is regenerating from the chemotherapy, they may be given antibodies. All right, maybe weekly IV injections or monthly IV doses of those antibodies to help protect her against some pretty severe diseases or infections. All right, the type of vaccines, there are three major groups. You have two major groups of the whole cell vaccines or the subunit vaccines. Within the whole cell vaccines, you have the killed or inactivated virus, killed cell, killed bacteria cell, or inactivated virus, because remember, viruses are not alive or dead. They are active or inactive. All right, and then part of whole cell vaccines, here you have a live attenuated cell or virus. So these guys are actually still alive once they get into you. Then they're going to replicate to small amounts, and your immune system is going to be attacking the virus, clearing it out, trying to work to get rid of it. And because up here you have killed or inactivated, right, it's not going to replicate. It's not going to be at high numbers, so there should be no risk of you getting sick. Here you have the live attenuated, which means it's not pathogenic. Right? They've taken a part of that bacteria out that doesn't make it pathogenic. All right, and this is actually a very good one to use if you can, because the virus or the bacteria, once they get into you, they replicate in numbers, so your immune system has to work a little harder to keep that mild infection or pseudo-infection in check. All right, so that's good, but the risk occurs primarily with viruses, and randomly that virus can actually mutate back to the virulent form and actually cause disease. And the good example of that is the polio vaccine, where it's about 1 in a million individuals who get the live attenuated vaccine. That virus will actually mutate back to its normal form and actually have disease. All right, and then the last one is the subunit, or the parts of an organism. And so it could be just a portion of the virus, it could be a portion of the bacteria cell, it could be a toxin, all right, toxins down here. So that's the subunit. So you have two major types, the whole cell versus the subunit, but within the whole cell you also have killed or inactivated virus, and you have live attenuated cells or viruses. All right, and the last concept for this chapter, woohoo, is called herd immunity. And this is just briefly mentioned, and I pulled this figure off of Wikipedia. I don't generally like Wikipedia, but this figure is actually a pretty good one. Herd immunity, unfortunately, does derive its name idea from cattle, where you have where you have majority of the herd that is vaccinated, and that minimizes the number of cows that are able to actually get sick. And this figure looks at people, right? Because the idea can cross over whether you're a cow or a elk or a pig or a chicken or a human. All right. So the blue people here are not immunized, but still relatively healthy. But the red are not immunized, and the red are sick and contagious. So these red people are going to be able to get the blue people sick, the blue that are most closest to them. And then what happens is then this person gets sick, and then this person, and it just spreads. And so over time you have a majority of the population that is sick. In this middle one, you have some people who are vaccinated, right, immunized and healthy, but most are not. You still have your two sick people, and what happens, you still have most of the population that is going to be sick. But down here, this is really what the goal of vaccination is to make sure that the majority of the population actually is immunized. That keeps them healthy. Then you have a couple of people who aren't immunized, and then you have, in this case, two people who get sick. Whereas over here, you actually have very few people who are sick because most people are already protected. And what happens, you start with two people who are sick, and you end up with three because of that herd immunity. The entire population, most of it, is immune.